Hey everyone, welcome. It's time to go over Sundance day one. Pretty amazing that we're already here. And I'm not going to say that I'm maybe your preferred Sundance correspondent, but I am one of them at the very least. And yes, we just got through the first day of Sundance, and the festival has already served up just some pretty wild and weird pieces of cinema, at least that I have seen. And I've got a pretty interesting lineup actually to go over here real quick, a nice little preview. And definitely stick around because I will be putting out reviews, like full reviews for these films. I already have one out for One to One, John and Yoko. That's in inbetweendrafts.com. And also going to have reviews. I've already filed my reviews for Didn't Die and The Ugly Stepsister. And pretty soon I'll have Jimpa out as well. But first, let's just talk about them real quick. I'll give you kind of a general sense of these movies and, what I think of them and all that stuff. No spoilers, obviously, because for a lot of you folks who want to have a chance to see these, maybe not that soon, unless you have tickets to see Sundance, maybe either in person or virtually, which is totally an option. So let's start with One to One, John and Yoko. So this is a documentary that was directed by Kevin McDonald. And this movie just plunges you right into the life of John Lennon and Yoko Ono during their kind of early years of like living in New York. So 1971 to like 1973 pretty much is what the movie covers. And the focal point of the whole movie is their infamous Madison Square Garden benefit concert, which is called One to One. So the movie kind of gets into that and, the significance behind what the One to One concert was, the fact that it was the only full-length concert that John Lennon ever did after leaving the Beatles. So obviously pretty significant for that reason. But this documentary it's the kind of documentary that does things that I love documentaries to do, which is that it breaks lots of rules. It really experiments with pacing and how to tell its story in a very engaging way that actually connects with the current generation. And in that sense, I really like how they decided to edit it a lot like it was made for TikTok, basically. And I'm not saying that to be sly here. A lot of this movie is just vignettes of, it's like you're surfing through a TV, and they set that up as like, oh yeah, John and Yoko would watch TV all the time, and they're going from like channel to channel basically, and it's kind of like TikTok where you're kind of just like scrolling down and it's chaotic. It's like something will maybe be on for like 2 seconds, and then you just stay on something to the end. And it's all of these things that really just place you into these people's lives, and they add so much context to who they were and why they were the way they were. And that to me is what a documentary should do. It's a really good documentary in that sense. And so I really enjoyed it. And I really liked how it just weaved all these different things, like protest footage, backstage drama that was happening, really like a lot of iconic performances. I mean, the way they were able to master the one-to-one concert, which we get to cut back to over the course of the movie. In fact, I was wondering, it's like, is this a concert film, but just this like classic, concert? And no, it's not quite that, of course, but it does kind of have like the bones of that to some extent, even though it's clearly trying to do a lot more than the typical concert film formula, I guess. So anyway, I found it extremely captivating. I really enjoyed it. The review's out. Definitely read it if you want to know a little bit more about what you can expect from that one. So there you go. Next up, we have Didn't Die, and this is one's going to be tricky to talk about because it's under embargo, so I can't actually tell you what I thought of the movie quite yet. That movie, the review's done. It's going to be coming out when the embargo lifts in, I think, about 5 days, so that's going to be coming in later in the festival. What I can tell you, though, is that the premise itself is pretty interesting. It's a post-apocalyptic zombie movie from this director, Mira Menon. I don't know how to pronounce their name correctly, so I apologize. But it stars Kieran Deal as a podcaster who is, again, during the zombie apocalypse, like she starts like a podcast, basically. It's really a radio show. And she's trying to kind of, survive the kind of existential dread of like, what if life was mundane, like after the zombie apocalypse? Like the worst of it is over and people have kind of just gotten used to it. It's not that big of a threat anymore. So now people are just like trying to cope and trying to be like, now what, essentially. It's an interesting movie. I definitely can't say anything in my opinion yet. I'm anxious to talk more about it for sure. But until then, you'll just have to trust me that it's definitely gonna have some interesting reviews coming out. Some folks probably gonna have some very insightful things to say about it because I certainly was thinking a lot about all kinds of things that again I won't get into. Anyway, I have to stop talking about it before I give something away. All right. A third film I watched was The Ugly Stepsister, and this might be my favorite movie I saw today. It's tough because I really liked the John and Yoko one. I really enjoyed that documentary, but The Ugly Stepsister, I think like in a way that movies don't typically do. There are certain movies I watch sometimes that just get my gears turning in terms of like telling a different kind of story, specifically fairy tale retellings. And this is a fairy tale retelling, a dark retelling of Cinderella. Very clear from the jump on that. And in my review, the review's not quite out yet. The embargo literally just went up, but I talk about how the movie kind of like if it was Cinderella thrown into a blender with like Black Swan, but then also it's like a body horror flick with like the substance. It's doing a lot of crazy stuff, but the director here is Emily Blickfeld, who I think this is her first time directing, if I'm not mistaken. And it goes there. It's gory. It's a satirical take on Cinderella that does a lot of the things you would expect, like a modern retelling of like, what if it's from the Ugly Stepsisters perspective? And the thing about it is you're following Elvira, who is, again, like the so-called ugly stepsister. She'll literally do anything in order to get her prince, basically. And what the movie does is it adds layers, it adds depth, it kind of adds plausibility to the Cinderella fairy tale in a way that it almost gets away with it perfectly. There are a couple things that the movie does that I genuinely was like, wait a minute, you were this kind of movie, now you're being this kind of movie. And it's all toward the end. It's so wild to me because if this movie had nailed the landing, I would have been singing its praises and been like, this is fantastic. I'm so glad. But it was ultimately a tough movie to end. And I'm not going to say it has a fairy tale ending, that's for sure. But it did leave me wanting, which is super weird. The body horror in this, the gore in this is unsettling to say the least. There's some pretty gross out stuff. I wouldn't say that it's not, for a lot of you who are used to horror, you watch a lot of horror, it's not going to like blow you away or anything like that. But if you go into the movie not really expecting that sort of thing, yeah, I do remember the Shudder logo for, the Shudder streaming service, which is a horror movie streaming service, came on. So I definitely knew what I was in for. I went into it not knowing too much, except also the poster, it literally shows the ugly stepsister with like this metal thing on her nose, and it's iconic instantly. And so anyway, Ugly Stepsister was a blast. I enjoyed it. I just wish the ending was a bit better. And I really felt like that it was like missing a scene or two, maybe, because it has this great kind of finale moment. There's some things that happen around the finale where I was like, I don't know. And then I'm like, but I'm still giving the movie the benefit of the doubt, right? And then the last couple scenes, I'm like, huh, that's it? Like, I don't know. It was like something was missing for me, maybe. But yeah, my full review is going to be out pretty soon, so I'll definitely be sharing that. And we'll see how that goes. I definitely think that especially a movie like that is going to, like, from a critic like me who is a man, like, there are only so many things that I can say empathetically about beauty standards. So definitely, this is definitely one where I think reviews from women are going to be much, much more, I think, scintillating or poignant, I suppose is the right word for that. So just keep that in mind. All right, and then that brings us to the last movie, Jimpa. I was not pronouncing the movie correctly in my head, that's for sure, until the movie starts and it explains that it's not Jimpa like I was thinking. It was Jimpa, kind of a way to refer to a grandfather character in the movie. So this comes to us from Sophie Hyde, who was the director of Good Luck Leo Grande. That was a movie that premiered at Sundance 2 years ago, I want to say. A movie I liked, I thought was quite good. And this movie is pretty heartfelt. The positives, I'll say that even though I found the movie kind of middling, I really, really liked John Lithgow and Olivia Colman in this. John Lithgow plays this grandfather character who is a gay rights activist, a gay man who came out when he was married and had a couple of children, but decided to co-parent and kind of have this like loving friendship relationship with his wife, right? There's a lot of other stuff that kind of happens. And in the present day, he lives in Amsterdam. He's not estranged from Olivia Colman, who plays his daughter, but certainly there is a bit of a distance there. And Olivia Colman in this movie is a filmmaker, so you can kind of see that there's definitely some autobiography or biographical sort of stuff that seems to be layered into this, which is made more apparent toward the end, even if it wasn't already. But Olivia Colman's character, she's in a happy marriage from what it looks like, and she has a non-binary child. That actor, I'd have to look up the actor's name because I didn't recognize. I'm not sure if they've been in other stuff, so I'm going to bring up their name here real quick. But they were quite good in this movie. They're like a teenager, non-binary character. And here we go. So their name is Odd Mason Hyde. There you go. But anyway, so they go on this trip to Amsterdam to visit Olivia Colman's character's father. And, he had a stroke a few years ago, but he's still kind of like living his life. He's polyamorous. He, has kind of just like this very built-in, lived-in dynamic. And a lot of this movie is spent in Amsterdam. And I love the Amsterdam of it all in this movie. Like being in this location is just, it's picturesque. It's just so wonderful. Just the way that we get to go to these coffee shops and all of it. Just, yeah, I've only been to Amsterdam once and it was only for like a few hours. It was a very, very quick kind of trip on the way to somewhere else. But I remember really taking in the city and wishing that I could spend more time there. And this movie got to do that for me. But where this movie kind of loses me, first of all, it's way too long. And also, the movie is about two main things. Well, it's about family. That's the big thing. But it's also about queer identity, sexuality, and generational divides when it comes to trying to resolve conflicts. And the big thing with this movie is that Olivia Colman's character is very conflict averse, and she sort of masks it in this kind of like new age therapy thing. And the movie just doesn't seem to make up its mind on what it's trying to say about that necessarily. Like, I can respect that maybe the movie is trying really hard to be, or maybe Sophie Hyde is trying to be very nuanced about this stuff, trying to show that, there's room to find certain things uncomfortable and unsettling. But yeah, it's a movie that's sort of about trying to make a movie that doesn't really have conflict. And as you can imagine, for something that's about over 2 hours, it's a lot to sit through. So I had some struggles with it. It's not a hard watch or anything, again, because the performances are so electric, and watching John Lithgow really in this movie kind of, go for it, especially because there's you see a lot of John Lithgow, I'll tell you that. I think that all those aspects of the movie kind of keep it going because it's Colman and Lithgow. They're wonderful actors. It's a little bit of I know it's not a Crown reunion because Lithgow was in the earlier seasons. I don't think Olivia Colman was playing the Queen until much later, like the third or fourth season. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that I really wanted to like this movie. I just felt like it's a movie about having conversations, and there were just times where I was like, can you just do something? Like, these characters are just not really clicking for me in certain ways. They just are. There's one scene where John Lithgow's character does start to finally kind of cause some tension. It reminded me of the scene from A Real Pain pretty recently where clearly it's like a character acting out for a reason. I was like, here we go. Okay, now the movie is starting to kind of pick up its pace a little bit and maybe do something, say something, and then it just kind of flatlines from there. And I don't know. There were certain things about this movie I could certainly appreciate. I think the heart's in the right place. I kind of, in my review, I liken it to watching somebody else's charming home movies. But again, it's somebody else's kind of home movies, as charming as they are. So all that said, yeah, definitely not my favorite. That'll close it up, though, for day one. I definitely had fun today. It's not like, I was about to say it's tough watching like 4 movies in a day. Tomorrow I'll be seeing 4 again as well because one of them is pretty long and even will be the whole day. This one, I didn't see the first one until almost around noon. But it is interesting, like going into movie, coming out, trying to write about the movie really quick, going into another one, waiting in the press lines and doing all this stuff. It's like there's an energy to it that's very like fun in an exhausting way, I guess. But it's like, it's not exhausting. It's not like I'm doing physical labor. I'm just sitting down. It's mentally exhausting because you're processing, you're absorbing all of these stories. You don't want to miss anything and you want to be extremely present. And you also have to remember to eat and drink water and all of that good stuff. But fortunately, there is a very nice supermarket right where all of these screenings are happening, at least for me. So I have been trying to take care of myself too. So don't worry about that. I'm sure some of you who might be related to me, who might be watching this, were worried about that. And I'll hear about it. But anyway, day 2 is just around the corner, literally half an hour from now. And until then, I'm not going to say what I'll be watching yet because you never know with Sundance. Stuff changes fast. And sometimes you just jump from one line to the other. So I'm not going to say anything yet, but definitely excited to do some more coverage tomorrow. And we'll see how things go. I'm not sure I can keep up this pace every single day, but we will do our best. So, okay, that's it for me for now. I'm going to stop yapping and see you on the next one.